Okay, hi everyone. Wow, what a day that's been. I think we hit you with everything we've got today. It's been a big day. Some of you are looking a little bit shell-shocked. Some of you are still looking excited, so that's pretty good. So my name's Sam Mason, and I spent the last 18 months on the data science team at Nearmap, helping to build out our artificial intelligence technology capability. Now recently, I just moved across to sales, or as Mick said earlier, defected. So, having defected across to sales, that gets me the chance to be up here and share with you exactly what it is that we've achieved. Now, I've spoken to many of you in the last few months, and I have to say I'm constantly amazed at the inventive ways that you've come up with for using our imagery. Using it for lead generation, for finding illegal land clearing and illegal dumping, for tracking demandable classrooms in the public school system, and for demand modelling in utilities. In construction, it's being used for remote site assessments, looking for access points and surrounding structures. Local councils using it to find changes in building footprints. In the pool and solar industries, it's often used for doing remote estimations and inspections. More famously, Rob mentioned this earlier, it was used for finding construction sites, so you can sell the boys more pastries and pies. And lastly, one of our favourite ones is the Wildlife Service, recently used it for relocating sick koalas. So many, many uses for our imagery. I'm sure that there's many, many more. But there's a problem, isn't there? Many of you have had to spend a lot of time and money paying engineers, architects, and GIS experts to trawl through Nearmap imagery, trying to find things down here in the world. What you're really trying to do is solve a business problem. It's expensive, it's error-prone, and it's time-consuming. And there really hasn't been any alternative. Till now. Now, what Mike showed you earlier today tells you something special. There's a lot more to building an AI system than just machine learning. Now, it's taken us 2 years to build that brain and put a body around it. And the reason it's taken 2 years is because a commercial-grade system needs to be scalable, responsive, and cost-effective. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. It needs to be highly available and performant. It needs to be repeatable, consistent, and auditable. For a given input, we want the same output, and we want a history of every single step in the process. But most of all, it needs to be relevant. Because otherwise, you're just paying a bunch of data scientists really high wages to have a lot of fun. So it's a huge investment and a massive undertaking, far more than most people realise. You see, machine learning will always give you an answer. Software engineering ties it all together. And the cloud gives us a scale that we need to operate at. And lastly, statistics tells us if any of that actually means anything. Now at Nearmap, we can do, and we actually have done, all of that. But we need you to tell us what's next. And that's what this workshop's all about. You see, at Nearmap, we have over 10 years of world-class imagery. We have our flagship products. We can look across time and across space. And now, for the first time ever, we're able to tease out the stories hidden within the living, breathing cities that we live in at a scale, precision, and frequency never attempted before across entire continents. Piece by piece, we're looking under the hood and pulling out the history and distribution of urban infrastructure and development in the world around us. But we didn't stop there. We did that across our entire Australian footprint. And then we went further and we did it across our US footprint as well. And as we expand across the globe, we're not going to stop there either. As a matter of fact, we're going to model the world. And as we're about to see, the models are starting to unveil large-scale industrial patterns in a way that's just never been possible before. So we've built this capability, but we're not experts in solar, environmental planning, power or construction. You are. That's why you're here today. I need you to tell us what's next. So when we ran this across our Australian footprint, we did it twice, just because we could. 2 dates a year apart. That way we could start to look at some changes. And even the most basic analysis has revealed some surprising results. So, story time. I'm going to tell you 3 stories now. Solar story here in Sydney. We'll jump over to Perth, talk about pools and power. And then back over this side and down to Melbourne, talk about construction and growth. And in each case, we're going to start big at the city level, drill down into council districts, go a little bit deeper into some suburbs, and finally focus on a few key areas. Now, while I'm doing this, I don't want you to worry too much about the numbers that you see up here. It's late in the day. Numbers, charts, graphs, they're not for everyone. So we'll keep it nice and casual. But this is what I do want you to do. Just try and imagine what any of you could do with this same information from this data set. So let's set the scene. As of last December, there are over 2 million solar customers right across Australia. That's a national share of homes of 20% and a capacity of about 8 gigawatt. They're being installed at a fantastic rate. Some estimates put the domestic market at 6 panels a minute. If you include commercial, it gets up to 10 a minute. But it's not the same everywhere. In New South Wales and Victoria, the share of homes is about 15%. South Australia, Queensland and Western Australia, almost double that. And with explosive growth, often comes problems. Not all the installations are all they could be. Recent audit by the Australian National Audit Office flagged as many as 1 in 6 installations as substandard, possibly as many as 1 in 30 as unsafe. And comprehensive inspections vary widely by state. So if you're selling, installing, repairing or modelling, knowing where they are is an essential piece of your toolkit. So let's have a look at the city metro area. We've assessed over 1 million properties, found over 153,000 solar installations. It's about 14% market penetration rate, pretty much bang on for New South Wales. But the important thing is, now that we know where all those solar panels are, we can start to look at some large-scale patterns. Now, before I tell you about this, every time I've shown this so far, the feedback's been it looks like something I just grabbed off Google. But this is a real graph that we created at Nearmap using our imagery extracted from our data. So just to be clear on that one. So what we're looking at here is the solar penetration rate in the council districts around Sydney. Fairly obviously, the highest penetration rate's been out in the western districts, with the district of Campbelltown down in the southwest being the standout. And straight away, we can compare this kind of data with that base 15% rate that I mentioned earlier and get a sense of who's over and underperforming right across the basin. And again, you can see here, Campbelltown down here in green being the winner, with the wealthier eastern suburbs there in red, lagging pretty far behind. So maybe you want to dig a little bit deeper. Let's go and have a look at what they're doing in the Campbelltown district. Campbelltown district has more than 10,000 solar customers. It's more than 20% share of homes. It's way above the state average. Now, if you're operating down there, you want to probably go further again and have a look at the suburbs that maybe you should be targeting. So there's the top 5 suburbs in terms of solar penetration rate in the Campbelltown district, with the suburb of Blair Athol up the top there at just over 30%. So let's fire up Map Browser and go and have a look at it. So there it is there. You can see it's a fairly small, dense suburb. There's not a lot going on there. Why don't we look at it through the lens of our artificial intelligence system? Looks like something from a Predator movie, right? So we've got all the roofs are in red, solar panels are all in yellow. So maybe you're interested in power loads, repairs, upgrades. Now you know where they are. You go build yourself a target address list. Maybe you just want to predict future usage. Maybe you just want to sell more. So who do you target? Because wouldn't it be great to hit that other 70%? In either case, these hot leads were easily extracted from our living data set that's just sitting there today waiting to be used. So what's great about having a data set like this is discovery. Because sometimes you're not even sure what the question is that you want to ask. You can ask and answer questions at a suburb, district, council, city, continental scale, but there's some really surprising stories out there. And while we're preparing this workshop, we stumbled across one that I wanted to share with you. We found the little suburb of Bungaribbi. It's a Sydney solar anomaly with a 96% solar penetration rate. That's more than 5 times the state average. So, not having heard of it myself, dug in, had a little look with our tools in our data set, and there it is there, Bungaribbi, or at least part of it. Town that looks a little bit like it might have been built overnight. As a matter of fact, it turns out it wasn't. It's been there since 1800 and it's got a really strong history of breeding thoroughbred winning horses. But run with this. So if we overlay our AI systems output, you can see there, all red, almost every place there has solar panels on it. So jumping back over to Map Browser, you can see that 9 years ago, this particular part of it was actually a paddock. So in this case, it does feel like it really was built overnight. It's just one little story that just fell out of our data set. It's nothing particularly special. The point of it is, I didn't go looking for this. When you have access to this sort of information at this sort of scale, these things just come out. So far, we've just looked at the world as it is. But what about what's changed? When we looked at the deltas over the last year, this is what we found across Sydney. Over 12,000 new roofs, over 4,000 demolitions, double that in completed construction sites, and 11,000 new pools. Double that in new solar installations, with 60% of them alone in just 3 outer council districts, Blacktown, Campbelltown and the Hills Shire. Anyone here from the councils probably won't be surprised by that. The solar standout across Sydney in that last year is the suburb of Kellyville, up in the Hills Shire, with 676 new installations alone. It's more than twice the nearest contender here in Blacktown, but all of them have had a lot of new activity going on in the solar industry. So now we've gone from city to district to suburbs. Let's go a little bit deeper, have a quick little look in at Kellyville. And here we found a really strong link between new and existing installations. In fact, over half of them occurred within 50 metres of an existing property, an existing customer, and a quarter within 25 metres there. Uses obviously include power demand modelling for the grid and targeted marketing. It's easy to visualise those properties with our outputs or with our imagery. You go and put together a target address list. So that's the end of our solar story in Sydney. It's only dipping your toes in the water in terms of what can be done though. So why don't we dive over to Perth, have a look at pools and power. Australians love our pools. There's over 1.4 million pools across Australia. But they're expensive, aren't they? Residential pools, estimated, take between 30 and 40% of the average household energy budget. Water consumption and power for pumps, filters and heaters has a large and seasonal impact on the utilities. And in modelling this demand, the distance to the nearest substation is really key. But if you don't know where the pools are, how do you do the modelling? I'm sure they do estimates and these sorts of things, but you need to know where the pools are. Pools are obviously a safety issue. Local councils are all required to inspect the pools in their area, I believe once every 4 years. 2017, it's been said that over 90% of pools inspected in New South Wales failed. Just north of Perth is the City of Stirling district. They did over 7,000 inspections last year, finding 1 in 3 customers in breach of the safety regulations. Now, you can do remote inspection would give you much larger coverage, but how do you know where to look if you don't know where the pools are? So, we zoomed out and ran across the Perth region. Found over 100,000 pools in the Perth area, so they're really into their pools over there, about 18% share of homes. And what's really interesting here is 43%, that number in the corner here, 43% of pool owners are also solar customers in the Perth region. That's over double what we have here in Sydney. So obviously, there's some different ways people over here have worked out how to save themselves money when they're doing pools and solar. I don't understand that. But whichever way you cut it, there's a lot of opportunity here on both sides of the country. So looking at the entire region, we can zoom right out, look at pool density and get a bit of a sense of where pool ownership goes across the whole region. And clearly pools are big up north in the Perth region there. And again, these aren't Google graphs, these are Nearmap graphs that we created from our imagery and our data. But maybe you can do your own analysis. Maybe overlay some economic numbers. Try and see how or if there's some sort of relationship between income and pool ownership. You're really only limited by your curiosity and your imagination. So I said before, City of Stirling district, just north of Perth. They have over 8,100 pools in this one council area. 36% of those pool owners are also solar customers. They did that 7,000 inspections they did that without a central register. Now, for inspection planning, maybe you'd also want to know where you're going to get your most coverage, and there's your top 5 suburbs right there. Going down another level, just outside the City of Stirling is my favourite place. It's called City Beach. Check this out. 2,300 odd properties. Over half of them have pools, 56%. I don't get it. Like it's a beach, right? It says it right there. But so lots of pools, but only 1 in 3 only 1 in 3 of those pool owners are actually also solar customers. Well, looked like an interesting place, and since we have 90 surveys in the area, we can go back and build up a bit of a profile and try and get a sense of the character of this suburb. So we did that, and here we go. So, not a lot going on in the top there, that's in red. We're looking at properties over the whole decade. Same down the bottom in black, that's construction. And you can see a very pretty slow growth in pools over the whole 10-year period. But obviously something's happened here in solar. Around about 2010, there's a bit of an inflection point, and solar's really started to take off. And it didn't take a lot of digging around for me to see that that corresponded to when the Western Australian government introduced its feed-in solar tariff scheme. And the whole solar industry in Western Australia went through the roof. And I think it's really nice to see these large-scale events reflected in the life of just this one small suburb. Again, just fell out of our data set, a little bit of poking around. Now, councils are also interested in the installation date on pools because the age of the pool determines what safety legislation needs to be applied. Again, well, we have the data, so it's pretty easy to go back and build up a profile here, put a minimum age on these pools. Straight away, for just this one suburb, you can see over 70% are at least 10 years old, but only 216 installed in the last 5 years. So again, a little bit of a character assessment of a place that, well, certainly I've never been to. I don't know if anyone's been to City Beach, but this is stuff that's just falling out of our data set, and I don't know what other stories are out there. So lastly, looking in the utility sector, knowing what spatial locations of pools are is key in modelling power loads and water usage. So what we're looking at here, these are all the pools in City Beach. Down here, I don't know if you can see in red, up here and up here are the two nearest electrical substations. And the further one being just over 4 kilometres away. Now, what's really interesting here is over half this suburb still hasn't been developed. There's still grassland. And if they suddenly decide to change that and develop that entire area, and they maintain that 56% love affair with pools that they seem to have, that entire area, the power demand profile for that whole area is going to change really drastically in a really short space of time. And if you're a utility, you're going to want to know about it, and you're going to want to know where all those pools are. So, enough about pools. Let's go down and have a look at Melbourne. Construction and growth. Melbourne is exploding. Population growth rate last year, 2.5%, far in excess of Sydney's. At this rate, population is going to overtake us here in Sydney by 2025. And there's over 500,000 properties just in the inner metro region in Melbourne alone. So, we ran our system across Melbourne. And again, what we saw in the last year, 2,800 construction jobs just in progress, 67% of which just started in that last year. 2,346 further jobs were completed. 5,000 demolitions observed, roughly the same amount of new roofs. Through the same process, we also saw a total of 64,000 solar installations, 9,000 of which weren't there a year ago. 2,500 new pools, for a grand total of 35,000 pools across the Melbourne region. Now, I know what I promised you. I said enough with the numbers, it's late in the day. So I'll stop with that, but I want to point out, knowing this has huge implications for transport, environmental planning, and the Victorian government's mandatory pool register, which is due, I believe, by the end of this calendar year. So we took this data and created another graph. Nearmap, love our graphs almost as much as we love our maps. What we're looking at here are the new roofs across the Melbourne region. And straight away, you can see down here in the southeast, district of Monash is where the bulk of the activity has been. And if we take all the new roofs, all the completed construction sites, all the new construction sites, and all those demolitions that we saw, and add them all up, you can start to put some really hard numbers on development activity across an entire metro region. Work proceeding around the fringes at a really high pace, mostly in those districts of Monash, Moonee Valley and Moreland. Turns out the top 5 suburbs alone account for almost 15% of all of that development activity. And here they are. So, we've got Mount Waverley, Glen Waverley, Glenroy, Preston. Now, what we're looking at here is just construction and demolitions, but if I put a graph together here with new roofs and completed construction sites, you see those same 5 suburbs. So clearly there's something going on in these particular areas in their local councils. And if we zoom out and look at this now at a suburb level, you start to get an idea of where those hotspots are really going on. And again, you can see Mount Waverley, Glen Waverley and Preston up in the north. So imagine doing the same thing here in Sydney. So as Melbourne continues to grow and develop, so will our coverage. We have the capability to take this in any direction, and our data sets will keep pace as our technology continues to develop and grow. So let's have a look at what's coming up next. So next in our roadmap, tree locations, roof canopy overhang, lawns and impervious materials, stormwater planning, etc. Tarpaulins and shade cloths, roof types and materials. But changes to building footprints, number of stories and living spaces, general urban infrastructure. Basically, we want to be driven by demand. Up until now, we've been driven by common sense and limited customer input. We have lots of ideas. We're looking to you to help us take this to the next stage. And that's why we're launching our content beta program here at Navig8. So now we've given you just a taste of what we've done, what's possible, and where we're heading. We believe our living data sets are world-class in terms of accuracy, frequency, and clarity. For us, the sky is the future. And as we spread out across the globe, we'll keep pulling out these stories, exposing them at a global level, local level, as we keep going wider and deeper. So we'll keep doing what we do best, help you all move up the value chain so you can focus on solving the problems that matter to you.